Welcome, I'm Randy Patterson, and this is Psychology Salon, a channel of videos on psychological topics. If you're interested in this kind of thing, click the subscribe button below. This is the third in a series of posts referencing the comments that people have been made to my earlier posts called Coping with Anhedonia Part 1 and Part 2. I'm reading selection from these comments and giving my reactions to them. If you're interested in a somewhat more organized and structured treatment of the subject of anhedonia, go back and look at my original posts. This one is more for people who want more information and who want my reactions to people's comments and questions. Anhedonia, to review, is a loss of enjoyment and interest in things that a person used to get pleasure from. I've been speaking about it mainly from the perspective of depression, which is what people think of most commonly when they talk about anhedonia. Okay, off to the comments. AB says, great video. I believe this technique is called behavioral activation. It is proven to be effective with anhedonia in the literature. Unfortunately, my depression has progressed to the point where I no longer have the willpower to commit to and follow through with this approach. Well, AB is quite right. Much of the material in the two Coping with Anhedonia videos is indeed based on behavioral activation. Much of the idea behind this is that disengagement from life seems to be not just a symptom of depression, but also a cause. It makes things worse. And when you have something that goes both ways like that, it creates a spiraling effect. Feeling lousy drives withdrawal, and withdrawal and disengagement drives feeling lousy. And a lot of mental health problems are like that. Behavioral activation tries to help a person get gradually reconnected with at least some aspects of their ongoing life. Partly to bring back some of the rewards, and partly to overcome the sense of dread from getting nothing done and having that pile just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Oh, and partly to reduce the amount of time spent sitting on the couch ruminating or problem solving or trying to figure out what their priorities are, all of which just tends to make things worse. Behavioral activation is one of the most well-supported interventions for depression, especially when it targets things like exercise, social contact, diet, and productive activity, all of which are also well-documented aids to recovery. But the videos also include a great deal about mindful acceptance, not just behavioral activation in its pure form. Mindful acceptance is about releasing our expectations of the emotional payoff of our actions. So rather than doing these things with the focus on how we feel or how we're going to feel, the focus is on the doing. The more we expect a certain payoff of becoming engaged, the less of that payoff we seem to get, and the more we set ourselves up for disappointment. And this doesn't mean that we don't want the anhedonia to lift, ultimately. We absolutely do. But the way that we get it to lift is to engage with activity while remaining in the mindful present, rather than hanging our hopes on what might happen in the future. We might think of this as acting as if. What would you be doing if you felt well? What would you be doing if you were living well, living a good life by your own definition? What does that look like? It's tempting to think that those actions will proceed naturally from our desires. I want this, and that's what feeds me into doing it. I hang out with friends because I want to hang out with friends. But during anhedonia, our desires are malfunctioning. We don't look forward to things the way we once did. So rather than follow that malfunctioning aspect of our nature, we need to override it and look at what does a good life look like, especially what has it looked like to us, at least, when we have been feeling healthy and well. if there has been such a time. And we begin engaging in those acts even though we don't really feel like it. So instead of our emotions driving our behavior can end up altering our emotions. But AB points out something else. Willpower is a real problem. He says, my depression has progressed to the point where I no longer have the willpower to commit to and follow through with this approach. It's useful to point out that behavioral activation is not just for mild depression. The techniques that I'm talking about were the core element of a treatment program I led for many years with people who were just out of hospital for major depression. They had been inpatients, most of them for weeks. So these were the most severe of the most severe cases. One of the things that helped them was being in a setting where they were accountable to each other. They each set goals for themselves every week, and they reported back on how things went when they met the following week. Other people also report that when goal setting is all a matter of their personal force of will, I have to do it, and if I do it, I will know, but nobody else will, and frankly, nobody else cares, it's really hard to keep going. When there is some kind of structure or frame for that work, it helps. Now, sometimes that's public commitment. Sometimes it's actually going to therapy, where the function of the therapist is basically to sit there and ask, so, did you do it? And that's actually the therapy. Sometimes it's something like having a date with a friend to go for a walk, where the friend will, be upset if you don't show up. Sometimes it's volunteer work or some kind of a role in a social group. So there's something that needs to be done when they go. I always think that if there's a social thing going on, you volunteer to set up the chairs. That will mean that you have to get there on time, you have to get there maybe a little bit early, and you've got something to actually do. It's not just being there and sitting quietly in the corner. Okay. MM says, you don't even get it. That's the extent of the comment. Well, just in case you think I cherry pick these replies, I wanted to throw that one in there. Not everyone likes these videos, and not everyone feels like I'm addressing what they want or that I understand the problem. And in fact, I probably don't understand the problem that MM is experiencing because I have not met with them personally and listened for hours to what's actually going on in their life. This is why individualized care from a qualified mental health professional is a really good idea. So when MM says, I don't know what they're going through, they're right. S says, what I would do to feel enthusiasm again. Well, maybe you can see the opening that's going to tempt any therapist in that comment, right? And appropriately so. Gosh, it sounds like this is something you really want. Well, what would you be willing to do? Because in fact, it is a task that involves effort. I would love to have a strategy that doesn't involve any effort, but I don't know of one. So this person is saying they'd really be willing to do a lot in order to feel enthusiasm again. And frankly, good chance is going to take a lot. Yeah, they're actually going to have to do a bunch of stuff before they begin experiencing that. Enthusiasm, by the way, is mostly anticipatory, right? So we feel enthusiasm for something we're going to do later today. And so that's the interest component. That's usually the last thing to come back. Enjoyment during comes first. Looking forward to doing something comes second. S follows up with, for the first time, I felt kind of excited when my mom came in talking about books with me. It was great. If I could only feel that way every day. My reaction is, actually, I don't think anyone feels that way every day. And maybe that level of expectation could be part of the problem. When we feel disappointment, it's not a result of what happens to us. It's the difference between what we expect or what we want and what we actually get. Now, I can't say for S because I haven't spoken with S, but one factor contributing to low mood for some people is that they've been promised by their teachers or by motivational speakers or by psychologists that happiness and excitement every day is normal or attainable. And this means that if you don't have it, you failed somehow. Well, you haven't. Feeling constantly engaged with your life is actually fairly unusual. I don't meet many people who are like that, and I'm not like that myself. So that expectation can be a real part of the problem driving low mood. In a way, optimism can drive low mood that way. Believing that it's possible to feel happy 24 hours a day can drive low mood because you're going to fail at that. There's also the element here of mom doing something that leads to that nice feeling of excitement. And so what we might do in therapy is ask what S could do herself that would ultimately contribute to that. Okay, DW says, the thing I notice is how I'd say, I used to do this, I used to love that. That's so sad that so many things stopped. Now, I'll interrupt this individual, DW, by saying, do you hear the lack of engagement there? So many things stopped rather than I stopped doing so many things. A large part of this is about taking things on ourselves and really owning our own life to a great extent. This person says, but I saved this video and I'll try to do things. I know I don't read entire books like I used to, but I look at pages often like comics, and I decided to buy a book like that. It's something rather than nothing. My response is that it can be useful to adopt a position that I'm doing this because it's what I'm doing, and again, relinquish the so that. I know I'm quite repetitive on that theme, but I think it's really central. And the idea is that we do, much like toothbrushing. Why am I brushing my teeth? Well, it's tempting to think, well, I'm brushing my teeth so they don't fall out 20 years from now. Great, but are you really thinking that every single morning? Probably not. Why are you brushing your teeth? I'm brushing my teeth because it's morning. Not because it's thrilling, not because of 20 years from now. I'm brushing my teeth because I'm brushing my teeth. Enjoyment in formerly enjoyed activities can begin to sneak in if you do them because you're doing them, right? You're going to the card game because you were invited to go to the card game and your well self would have liked the card game, so you're going to do it. And you're not really monitoring your emotional state that much. Why am I playing cards? Well, because card playing is something I do. That's why I'm doing it. Why am I going for this walk? Because walking is a good thing for me to be doing. Sure, I used to love it, but I'm walking because I'm walking. That's it. Now, I'll add that a lot of people who feel discouraged or anhedonic find that the ideas that come to them are things designed, again, to pass the time at home or distract them from how they're feeling. Right? If I do this, at least it's a distraction. I'm not thinking about the rest of my life. These are more about avoidance than living your life. I encourage more active engagement types of activity involving getting out of the house, getting things done, even if they're not very fun things. Getting the plumber in to fix the toilet. Good, that's a great thing. Or pursuing active goals. These seem to be more potent at kickstarting enjoyment than actually watching videos or doing solitary hobbies. LA says, thanks for this video. That's exactly what I thought I should do to pull through this. However, it's not that simple every day. Some days, I just don't do what I know I have to do. Still, I guess we need to make a tiny effort every day. Well, that's not bad. That's pretty good. I will say that it can sound a little bit perfectionistic every day. I actually can't think of much that I work on every day. Maybe brushing my teeth. But I do think LA has a point here. There are two ways to spend energy. First, go for that big ticket item and really try to accomplish a huge amount. Or do things at a less challenging level. So there's intensity, making a large leap forward, and then there's frequency, making a lot of small steps. Going for intensity often means that a person exhausts themselves and then lies in bed for the next week. Given a choice, I recommend frequency. Less ambition, more often. It relates a little bit to hiking in a way. If you're hiking up a very steep trail, one thing you can do is you can take these enormous steps that lift you about 1.5 feet with every step that you take. So you gain about 1.5 feet elevation with every step on one of these really steep trails. You would think that that would be the way to go. In fact, you will wind up getting much more tired and burning yourself out more than if you take very small steps and only gain about 2 inches of elevation with every step. So more steps, less ambitious, often better in hiking and in overcoming anhedonia. A says, thank you, this gives me some guidance in the meantime until I can talk to a therapist. Well, this reply indicates that this person is really planning to seek out assistance to work on this problem. Wonderful. YouTube videos can be good for basic information, although, let's face it, there is a huge amount of misinformation and disinformation on this site as well. Actually applying the information to the specifics of a person's own life, that's something a therapist can really help with. So I think there's a role for both. D says, this doesn't work. What to do? I've tried everything and still anhedonia, and I'll never be able to reach the life I want, and nothing else will give me any joy. You can hear all of the sort of absolutes in that. Nothing will give me any joy, and so on. Might be true. Sometimes a person has this complete sense of hopelessness that they will ever reach any of their goals. A lot of therapists, and I'm one of them, would consider asking a person who says something like this to take some time out and really nail down what they mean by the life I want. You know, this person uses the phrase, the life I want. Wonderful, let's figure out what that is, even though it seems unattainable. What is it? What is that? What are all the aspects of it? What does that life look like? And not just how would you feel if you had that life? What would we see? I talk about the idea of you're in that great life that you imagine, and we follow you around with a video camera living that life. We can't see how you feel. We can't see how you're thinking. Well, all we can see is what you're doing. So what are you doing in this good life? Great. Why? Why would we do that? Well, partly it's to sharpen up that image of what it is that they want. Sometimes what a person realizes is that what they imagine is actually something that very few people have. Their vision of happiness might have been shaped, for example, by consumerism or the media. Sometimes having a huge, grandiose, expensive vision can be a source of misery more than one of happiness, because it provides a measure that you actually can't live up to, right? Never will, right? Or very unlikely. I have a principle I come back to in therapy over and over and over again. It's hard to let go of something until you know what it is. So if you're grasping something, and probably to feel better you need to let it go, you need to find out what it is first. What are you hanging on to? What is that vision? And is it a real requirement for your happiness and fulfillment? Or is it possibly more a product of advertising? Even if a person really wants to achieve something, like having a partner, or getting a good job, or buying a nice house, or fine, even being the head of some big corporation. The vision can still get in the way, because in order to do any of those things, you have to focus not on the outcome, but on what you're doing. You can't be dreaming years down the road. You have to act in the present. And sometimes a dream can get in the way of that. Sometimes a person comes up with a more realistic vision, and it has multiple bits. Now, some of them might be achievable, and there might be concrete steps that they can take towards these. And maybe there are other bits that they don't actually need. If you ask people to go back in time 10 or 20 years and remember what they would have said they wanted at that time, earlier, at an earlier age, many of them will realize, yeah, I didn't actually get that one or that. I got this one, but I didn't get these other ones, right? And some have happened and others haven't. And it turns out that it's okay, right? They didn't need those other things for their happiness. As a matter of fact, the clearer the vision you have, the more, it's going to be like this, and it's going to be a corner office, and the paint is going to be peach on the walls, like whatever. The more precise the vision you have, the less likely it is that it's going to happen, right? It's practically a guarantee that what you envision happening in your life is not actually what's going to happen. It's going to be something else. In some lives, it'll be something better. Not always, but it'll be different than what you imagine. So we may think we know the requirements for happiness. I have to have this, and this, and this, and this. Research shows over and over and over again just how poor human beings are at predicting what will make us happy. Turns out we're terrible at this. And some things that we might think are absolute requirements turn out not to be. N says, I feel like I want to go out and do things, talk to people, but my life isn't that way. I hate being home doing nothing, wasting my days. Well, obviously, we'd need to know more about N's life situation to be any use to him. But he points out something useful, I think. He says that he wants to go out and do things and be around other people. That's interesting. It suggests that he actually has that desire. Great. During Anhedonia, that desire or interest in doing things is often gone. So Anhedonia may or may not be his issue. It's possible that what he really means is that he wants to want those things. He wants to feel the desire. That would be a little closer to an Anhedonia presentation. But, he says, my life isn't that way. Now that would be a good thing to follow up on. How not? Why not? What are the barriers holding him back? One thing I've often seen is a sense that only quite expensive activities really hold out the prospect of true enjoyment. I remember a person who said at one point, the only thing that would really make him happy is going on a cruise. And that was something that he'd never done and honestly couldn't really afford. He was guessing that that would make him happy. It might, but cruises are only so long. And it might not. When we actually measure how people really feel during activities, the cost of those activities doesn't seem central to their capacity to bring pleasure. So people often feel pleasure doing activities that turn out to have been free. And the really expensive ones turn out not to be that great after all. Again, the prediction is not always in line with what's really true. Now he also mentions, I hate being home doing nothing, wasting my days. Wonderful. Wonderful. I often say that our emotions lie to us. Fear tells us that we're in real danger, even when we're not. Despair tells us that everything is hopeless. Then it goes away and it turns out everything was not hopeless. But sometimes an uncomfortable emotion is telling us something that we actually need to hear. He hates being at home doing nothing. That's an emotion worth paying attention to. That's an emotion worth trusting. Again, we don't know his circumstances, and I can't really say anything without more details. But when I see a young person who's hanging around home, no job, no employment, watching YouTube and trying to find ways to pass the time, and if they're feeling bored and dissatisfied, I'm really glad they're bored and dissatisfied. They should be. Those are trustworthy emotions. That's boredom worth trusting. That boredom, that's your life calling to you. Sometimes people want to get rid of that dissatisfaction. How do I stop feeling dissatisfied about being at home with no friends and nothing happening and nothing but, the computer in my bedroom? You don't. That dissatisfaction is the healthiest thing in your life. Sometimes dissatisfaction really is the healthiest thing to feel. It can really be the spark to cause us to change the way that we're living. So those are some more comments on the Anhedonia posts and my thoughts about them. Add your own reactions to the comments section here or in those other videos. Maybe we can keep the dialogue going. So that's it for now. I may do more of these at some point. Meanwhile, keep the comments coming. Remember that the best way to express appreciation for a channel is to subscribe. In addition, I have paid courses for professionals and for the public at psychologysalon.teachable.com. And the Assertiveness Workbook is now out in a second edition, available through bookstores and online retailers. Thanks for watching.